Hey guys, welcome back. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is an entitled people story. It was a dream come true for my wife and me when we finally purchased our first home. We had found an incredible deal on a foreclosed property and immediately fell in love with it. Little did we know that our joy would soon turn into a nightmarish battle to protect our newfound sanctuary. Months passed, and life in our new home was blissful until an unexpected visitor arrived at our doorstep. I opened the door to find a woman standing there, who brazenly darted past me and barged into the house. Startled, my wife and I demanded an explanation for her intrusion. The woman, filled with rage, claimed that the house belonged to her and ordered us to leave immediately. It dawned on me that she must be the previous owner who had faced foreclosure. Attempting to reason with her proved futile as her erratic behavior escalated. Sensing the danger, I discreetly signaled my wife to call the police while I tried to engage the woman in conversation. Moments later, the police arrived and the situation quickly unfolded. The woman accused us of breaking into her house, but we presented them with our rightful ownership documents. The officers, recognizing her as the previous owner, escorted her away, and we breathed a sigh of relief, hoping it would be the end of her relentless pursuit. However, our peace was short-lived. Over the course of the following year, she returned periodically, relentlessly banging on our doors, demanding entry. To protect ourselves, we installed a security camera system, which allowed us to identify her and promptly threaten to involve the authorities. This deterred her, but she soon resorted to a new method of harassment. She began having her mail delivered to our address intentionally, flooding our mailbox with personal and sensitive documents. Concerned about the potential for identity theft, I visited the post office, explaining the situation and requesting a change. As a precaution, I acquired a P.O. box, ensuring our mail's security until the matter was resolved. To our disbelief, we discovered that the woman had obtained a fake deed and managed to change the locks, gaining unauthorized access to our home. Though we acted swiftly to regain control, she escaped with that day's mail. Determined to put an end to her malicious actions, I decided to take legal action, accusing her of mail theft, trespassing, and fraudulent ownership claims. The day of the court hearing arrived, and I was prepared to present my case. However, during the proceedings, I uncovered the woman's motive. She had been using the stolen mail as evidence to support her false claims of residency. Despite her desperate attempts, the judge saw through her deception. With overwhelming evidence, including the door camera footage and her theft from my P.O. box, justice prevailed. The judge issued a restraining order against her, warning that any further violation would result in her arrest. They also confiscated the fake deed, preventing her from using it to deceive others. Additionally, measures were taken to redirect all mail addressed to her away from our home, allowing us to discontinue the expense of the P.O. box. One would expect that such legal consequences and a restraining order would dissuade the woman from her relentless pursuit. However, mere months later she returned, pounding on our door once again, demanding our eviction. This time we followed the judge's advice and immediately called the police without engaging with her. They swiftly arrived, removing her from the premises. Although unsure of the precise consequences she faced, we took solace in the fact that she had finally been dealt with. Her absence from our lives was a relief, indicating that either the law had taken its course or she had come to her senses regarding the consequences of violating a restraining order. Thankfully, the legal expenses were covered by our home insurance, sparing us the financial burden. While the P.O. box incurred a cost, it was a small price to pay for temporary peace of mind. Looking back on our ordeal, I advise anyone facing a similar situation to act swiftly and decisively, refusing to tolerate the intrusion of an unstable individual into the sanctuary of their home. The next one is a pro-revenge story. I live in an apartment building that has end-to-end parking for 2 spaces per apartment, and access to the parking levels, 1, 5, is done via a locked automatic roller door. People can only get through if they have a remote for it, or if they sneak through behind someone else. I only have a single car, and sometimes I let my friends park in the space in front of my car if they give me notice. So, I generally park at the back of the double space because it's easier for my neighbors who have 2 cars. Earlier this year, a random car began parking in front of mine on Friday afternoons, meaning I couldn't go out with my car on Friday nights. It was annoying, but not the biggest issue when you live super close to the city. This continued nearly every week for about 5 weeks when I didn't park my car at the front of the bay, which I began doing. But there were times when I planned to leave the space free for friends coming over or whatever, and the car appeared again. I made repeated attempts to stop this behavior by leaving notes, which escalated into leaving printouts of a photo of the car with the license plate clearly visible, and an explanation that if it happened again, I'd press charges and/or have the vehicle towed. Well, it happened again, and this time it was still there Saturday afternoon when I had been planning on going away with a group of my mates. My guess is someone went out on Friday, got drunk, and decided to pick up the car later, not concerning themselves with the inconvenience it caused anyone else. It clearly hadn't moved, as my aggressive note telling them to leave was still there sitting limply under their wiper blades. I figured enough was enough, it was time to have the vehicle towed, so I called building management and eventually called a towing company, who refused to help because the space was on the 3rd floor, and they couldn't get any trucks up to that level due to height and space restrictions. Ordinarily, most people would be pretty much screwed at this point, and I will admit I briefly considered sitting on the hood of the car until the owner came to pick it up while sending my mates on their way without me. But they would have had to work out a new arrangement for transport because one car wouldn't have cut it. Fortunately for me, my parents live only 30 minutes away and have a garage where I work on one of my cars that's nearing the end of a minor restoration. One of the things I use quite often is a set of vehicle positioning jacks to maneuver my project car against the garage wall and minimize the space it takes up. For anyone who doesn't know, vehicle positioning jacks are devices that fit under each wheel, allowing you to lift the car on hydraulics so you can move it in any direction. While I hadn't originally gone to retrieve them, a bright idea came to my head when I had to take my project car off them. None of my mates minded spending an extra hour to teach someone a lesson for interfering with us. So, we grabbed the jacks and went back, propped the car up, and wheeled it out. 6 guys can easily move around a small hatchback, so we pushed it across the level slowly and carefully to an area where parking wasn't allowed, but had a load-supporting pillar with enough space for a car behind it. It was a little section of the garage that wasn't lit and completely out of the way. Typically, there's a guy on my level who parks a motorcycle there, but he isn't supposed to, and I doubted he would mind. We squeezed the car between the pillar and the wall, with the front pointing towards the wall. I took back my angry note, the jacks, and we left to enjoy our weekend. When the owner came back on Monday afternoon after the long weekend, the car was still there. It wasn't surprising, considering there was only about a foot of space for movement between the pillar and the car, and another foot or so between the car and the wall. From the fact that the front wheels had changed, we guessed they had tried to get it out unsuccessfully. It eventually disappeared later in the week, though I'm not exactly sure how they managed it. I never saw that car again. The next one is a petty revenge story. Obligatory apologies for the format, I am on my phone. This happened about 12 years ago. I was attending my family reunion with about 400 members in attendance. My dad's girlfriend dropped the bomb that they got engaged with no warning. My dad's fiancée was very rude to my brothers and me since we met her and was very petty. My family also didn't like her. Here's the kicker, though. My dad made my mom sign a prenup because he had a good-paying job. When my mom filed for divorce 5 years prior to this family reunion, she ended up having way more than him, and he was dragging out the divorce to get alimony. The fiancé saw that she finally won my dad because she was the one mistress that got a ring. Anyway, throughout the day, the fiancé would goad me into commenting on her ring or engagement, but I wouldn't because I knew I couldn't say anything nice. She knew I was upset my dad hadn't asked us if we liked her enough to support an engagement, so she wanted to twist my words to get me in trouble. She did this often, and it would result in me being emotionally, verbally, and often physically injured by my dad. By the end of the day, I was exhausted from being basically chased and incriminated. To be honest, I had more patience as a 13-year-old than I do at 25. Here's where I got revenge for myself and my mom, who was trapped in the never-ending divorce. She confronted me and told me I was rude for not telling her congratulations and asked why I had no manners. I looked right at her in front of a group of my aunts and said, "I don't know why he bothered proposing. He won't sign the divorce papers with my mom." I can't remember what happened immediately after that because I truly believed I wouldn't live to see the next hour. But I did. My idiot dad had the unsigned divorce papers in his truck at the reunion, and the fiancée found them. She ran around the most dangerous part of town screaming her head off. My grandma had to track her down and drag her to the car by the hair. I sat in the backyard with my cousins, getting eaten by mosquitoes, while I heard my grandma, great-grandma, and aunt threaten my now stepmom that if she stepped out of line and embarrassed them again in their town, it would be the last thing she ever did. She left me alone after that, and I secured my mom's divorce that summer. The next one is a malicious compliance story. So, for a little context, this story is not mine. This happened to my father in the 80s and the 90s, but I will write it in the first person. In the 80s, I lost everything I could. I dropped out of college, my father died of a heart attack, and my mother was somewhere in the wind. I wasn't worth the air I was breathing. As a last effort, I saved up some money to move to a different state so that I could start fresh. I chose Montana to be my new home. Because I didn't have a college degree, I knew I could only make a living with my hands and not my head. After a bit of looking around, I found work on a ranch. The owner of the ranch, let's call him Jack, took me under his wing. He taught me how to ride a horse, how to herd, how to do cutting, roping, and many other useful skills on a ranch. My goal was to have enough money for a deposit so I could buy a house, or at least some land. After about 3 years, I had the money, but I loved the ranch and the folks so much that I chose to stay longer. In the spring of the 88, I finally made the decision to quit. I was fully honest with Jack about my intentions. I told him that I wanted to buy some land to have a ranch of my own, and potentially get married and start a family. Being the absolute champ, Jack offered me some contacts of people who were selling land. After some time, I chose a piece of land near Jack's ranch. I got a loan, bought the land, and in the summer, I started building my house. By winter, the house was done, and it was planned that in the spring, I'd build a barn and some fences, corrals among others. In the spring, it was back to work, and before summer started, I had nothing to do. I had a lot of time on my hands while I was waiting for all the paperwork to be done, and I wasn't going to spend 2 weeks sitting on my porch doing nothing when Jack promised me that if I ever needed it, he would give me a job. Now, I didn't need a job because of money, but I just didn't have anything to do. So I went to my good old friend Jack if he needed some help. He said that he could use me to guide people on the tours he was offering. His ranch is not only in the cattle business. He also offers tours of the pristine nature on his property. I happily accepted the job despite not liking people, but still, it was better than just sitting on my front porch and doing nothing. The first few days went without a problem, but then a wild Karen appeared to brighten up the day. I was just returning from a tour when I saw this Karen in the middle of the field yelling at this girl, who was also a guide. I didn't know the girl, but in my books, whoever makes a girl cry is an a-hole. I came over to them, and in the most passive-aggressive voice I can, I said, "Good day. What seems to be the problem?" And the Karen's wrath was now aimed at me, and she yelled back, "This idiot has no respect for the desires of the customer. Give me a manager now." I didn't expect such strong wording, but I kept my cool despite my hot-headedness, and I went up to the girl who was now sobbing because this Karen was mouthing off to her pretty good, and I said to her, "Leave her to me, I'll take care of her. You go take a break and tell Jack that I'll be with this piece of work." She gave me a grateful smile and a nod and rode away. I went to the Karen and I said to her, "Ma'am, I can't get you the manager as he's busy right now, but if you want, I can be your guide in her stead for the remainder of the tour." She replied very politely by saying, "Sure, I think even the trees will be better than that idiot." Every part of my hot-headed self wanted to pretty much bury this woman right then and there, but I kept my cool, and we headed off on the tour. And within the first minute, what a piece of work she truly was. She behaved like she knew best, and everyone was lesser than her, and everything should be given to her. When we were about to turn around and go back, I gave her a choice. We could either go the official route, or we could return by the unofficial route, which is shorter, but there were bear sightings reported in the past few days. I told her that the unofficial route was quite dangerous, but just as I wanted her to do, she vehemently objected because she was the wisest person alive and knew the best. Great. My trap had worked. After about 5 miles on this unofficial route, she started screaming and turned so pale that she was even more white than paper. In the distance, there was a grizzly. I knew about the danger I had dragged both of us into, but in the end, it was technically her choice to go that route. I told her to make herself as big and loud as she could. I followed suit, but the bear kept getting closer. It kept growling at us. With every growl, Karen was getting even paler. After it got way too dangerous, I shot a round out of my rifle and the bear got scared and ran away into the woods. The entire ride back, she kept yelling at me that I intentionally put her in so much danger. And yes, I'll admit, it was quite reckless taking a visitor into a part of the woods where there were bear sightings reported. But technically, she made the decision to go that route. I stayed silent the entire ride because I couldn't keep a straight face. I was laughing maniacally in my head, and I knew that if I looked at her, I would start laughing out loud. When we returned, she was shaking violently and was pale as ever. After I tied up her horse, she demanded that I get her the manager, and I gladly pointed her to the little building in the distance, and she stormed off. She started yelling at Jack, and I could see that Jack was trying his hardest not to break out laughing. I could hear that she was demanding that I be fired, but the neat part was, I wasn't an employee of Jack's. I was doing it as a favor for a friend, and thus I couldn't be fired. After the Karen's tirade ended, Jack came to me laughing like a kid, and he asked me, "How did you even come up with that, OP?" I started giggling as well and answered, "Well, she made the girl cry, so I wanted to give her special treatment. I heard of the bear sightings, and it worked out well in my favor." He then asked me not to do that again as it was reckless, and I agreed. And I told Jack, I don't plan on doing it again, but I had a plan if the bear mauled the damn wretch. My defense would be that I gave her the choice to go on a safer path, but because she was apparently of higher intellect than me, I simply agreed. Jack gave me a smile and headed off. Years later, my father would end up meeting that girl guide again. Her name was Abby, but nowadays I simply call her Mom. The next one is an entitled people story. When I was 17, currently 41 I worked for a big chain retail store. At that time, I was working at the customer service desk, which dealt with returns. In September, while I was sorting the returns we had processed over the last hour, a lady, about 40 years old, let's call her Karen, walked up to the desk. Since the bins for the different departments were along the wall behind me, I didn't notice her approach the counter. It couldn't have been more than 2 minutes that she was standing there when she said, "Hey boy, get over here and help me." Taking a deep breath, I turned around and apologized for not having seen her walk up. I asked, "How can I help you?" Karen threw down a woman's bathing suit and barked, "I need to return this." Aside from the fact that it had obviously been worn more than once, judging by its condition, we had a no-return policy on bathing suits and underwear that was posted in the department of the store and on a large sign right behind me, along with the other return policies. I explained to her that I wouldn't be able to process the return for health reasons, and that it was clearly marked in the store before she bought it. That's when she started to yell. For the first 15 seconds, I was stunned at her 60 anger response. Then I turned around, ignoring her, and began sorting the returns again. That's when Karen said, "You look at me when I'm talking to you." I smirked a little and turned back around. Calmly, I said, "Ma'am, you're not talking to me. You're yelling at me. I don't get paid to be yelled at. If you want someone to yell at, I can get you a manager. They are going to tell you the exact same thing. Would you like me to get that manager for you?" Karen started to go off again at me. So I turned back around to continue sorting the returns. That's when a manager happened to walk by and hear what was going on. The manager came over and asked what was going on. The lady started to yell at him and he told her he didn't ask her. He looked at me and asked, "What is going on?" I explained the whole situation to him. He nodded, turned back to her, and said, "Ma'am, my employee is right about our return policy, which is clearly marked in the department where you found it and on the large sign posted on the wall. As a manager, I could make exceptions for returns. However, I do not tolerate people treating my employees who are following procedures the way you just did." That's when she changed her tune, apologizing. But my manager was firm. He told her that she would not be getting the return, and if she comes back and treats another employee this way, she will be banned from the store. When she had left, the manager asked if I was okay, which I was. He applauded how I handled the situation, and I thanked him for having my back. The next one is an entitled parent story. My mother was angry with my dad because he didn't want me to stay with her when she was drinking and doing drugs and generally being unstable. So she lied to CPS and said that he was molesting me. They did an investigation in mine and my dad's county and concluded it wasn't true. But she had manipulated CPS in her county and they believed her, so they told her to have me visit her and they took me while I was there. They refused to listen to my dad and CPS in his county, who said they hadn't found any evidence and that they weren't allowed to take me as I didn't live in that county. But they refused to listen and placed me in a foster home that abused me for years. She ruined my entire childhood just because she wanted to beat him and be better. She never cared about me. She just didn't want him to be happy and didn't mind me getting hurt in the crossfire. Edit. My mother died 4 years ago. I haven't had any contact with my dad for many years. I just got all my documents from CPS and requested the documents from CPS in that other county as well. Turns out she lied. I've always thought I was molested, but never really felt anything towards it. It wasn't something that affected me. Now I know that's because it never happened. I made contact with my father and heard his side of the story, and all the holes in the story make sense now. I'm pissed that I was robbed of a normal childhood. My dad is super sweet and said that he tried to fight it for years and became really broken. While I grew up believing no one wanted me or loved me, we've decided to keep in contact and try to move forward. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already.